The deepest scars are always left by the ones we trust the most. I once dismissed this as melodramatic fiction, until that crisp autumn morning when I sat across from my mother in the gleaming conference room of Meridian Maritime Solutions, watching my world collapse around me. The space smelled of sandalwood and barely concealed ambition. Behind my mother hung an imposing oil painting of the first cargo vessel our family had ever purchased, the humble cornerstone of the empire she'd crafted from nothing. She often remarked, "This company is the legacy I'm building for our future." What she neglected to mention was that my future within it had an expiration date. My name is Sophia Chen. Until yesterday, I served as Chief Innovation Officer at Meridian Maritime, our family's shipping and logistics enterprise. For 8 years, I poured everything into transforming Meridian from a regional operator into an international maritime force, developing cutting-edge navigation systems, implementing sustainable practices, and creating proprietary software that revolutionized how we tracked our fleet across the globe. I worked tirelessly alongside my mother. I sacrificed weekends, holiday gatherings, even postponed my wedding to nurture this company to greatness. Yet there I sat, watching her delicate hands fold together as she delivered my sentence with devastating calm, "Your sister will be taking over as head of operations. Your position has been eliminated." The declaration wasn't delivered with rage or contempt. There was no dramatic scene, just a calculated statement she'd certainly rehearsed with the board members, executives, and my younger sister May, who sat beside her. May wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared at the polished table, jaw tight in the charcoal blazer I'd helped her select for her first department presentation 2 years ago, the same sister who had once tearfully called me at midnight begging for help with her first quarterly forecast. "Mom?" I whispered, maintaining composure. "I'm sorry, could you clarify what you just said?" She nodded clinically, as if delivering a weather report rather than shattering my professional identity. "May has demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities, and we believe she's prepared to guide Meridian forward. The board has unanimously approved this transition. Your departure is effective immediately." I felt the weight of every gaze around the table, watchful, wary, but not shocked. They'd known. Every one of them had known. I inhaled deeply, then rose to my feet. "Very well," I said, voice unwavering. "I understand." May finally looked up at me. Perhaps she anticipated an outburst, tears, pleading. Instead, I opened my tablet, tapped a few commands, and said, "The presentation for tomorrow's investor conference is finalized on the shared server. It's all yours now." I handed my tablet to the head of IT without further comment. "Good luck with the investor showcase tomorrow," I added with a ghost of a smile, then turned and walked out with measured steps. I didn't glance back. I didn't need to, because exactly 12 minutes after that meeting concluded, a hidden string of code I had embedded into the presentation would quietly activate, not to destroy anything, but to reveal everything. Something my mother and sister had no idea I had been methodically documenting for the past 7 months. It began when I noticed unusual access patterns in our secure databases. Files duplicated without authorization. I installed monitoring protocols, digital tripwires, and a Sentinel program hidden within our flagship navigation interface. I discovered emails, strategy documents, planning sessions I hadn't been invited to, forums where my innovations were presented without attribution. This wasn't merely betrayal. It was intellectual theft, glossed over with favoritism and delivered with professional courtesy. I had been constructing Meridian's future while they were designing my exit. So I stopped fighting for recognition at a table already being cleared of my place setting. I prepared instead, not seeking revenge, but self-preservation, because the revolutionary system scheduled for demonstration tomorrow, the AI-driven maritime routing platform that had secured our most lucrative contracts, was my creation. Not my mother's, not May's, and certainly not theirs to appropriate without consequence. Back in my loft that evening, I didn't dissolve into tears. I didn't rant to friends or post cryptic messages online. I ordered Persian takeout, uncorked a bottle of Shiraz, and connected my private external drive. On the screen, a timer appeared. Demonstration protocol activating in 15 minutes. I smiled, knowing they were oblivious that tomorrow, before our premium investors, the system would request one critical element before proceeding: authentication from its architect. And that architect was no longer employed by Meridian Maritime. By 8:30 the next morning, my phone had registered 23 notifications. I acknowledged none of them. Voicemails from my mother, 3 from May, 1 from Harrison in Investor Relations, and another from an unlisted number I immediately recognized as the emergency conference line. I let them accumulate like unread warnings. At 9:15, I brewed an espresso, settled onto my balcony, and accessed the live investor stream on my personal backup tablet, the same device I'd used to test the platform's adaptive learning algorithms. Ironically, the very technology they planned to showcase as Meridian's proprietary breakthrough. The video feed was impeccably clear. I watched from afar as my mother stood confidently before a sleek display with Project Neptune emblazoned across it. She wore her signature jade pendant, reserved exclusively for pivotal meetings, and began her address with practiced poise. As many of you already know, Meridian Maritime has consistently pioneered advancements in global shipping logistics, she said. Today, we're unveiling something truly revolutionary. The presentation unfolded according to plan. A sophisticated, intuitive interface demonstrated how the AI system could analyze maritime traffic patterns, optimize shipping routes, predict weather disruptions, and ultimately reduce operational costs by up to 34%. Then came the moment. 8 minutes in, the display flickered once. Then again. My mother hesitated. Several investors shifted uncomfortably. The interface pulsed twice more before a new screen materialized. Authorization error, creator credentials missing. Please provide a valid security token to continue. I could almost taste the uncomfortable silence through my screen. My mother touched the display once, twice, then glanced over at the technical director, who sat motionless behind his laptop. Is this part of the demonstration? An investor inquired. Then the screen transformed again. Unauthorized utilization detected. Developer has initiated Ethical Compliance Protocol 9.2. Internal system logs now accessible to all stakeholders. And then, the logs began scrolling, every timestamped document, every after-hours access, every unauthorized meeting between May and external consultants discussing licensing agreements before my official removal. Even email threads debating when to orchestrate my departure. I sipped my espresso and tilted my face toward the morning sun. What I had engineered wasn't merely intelligent software. It was a guardian, one that observed and adapted not just from code, but from human interactions. It didn't simply monitor vessel movements across oceans. It tracked behavioral patterns, including internal misuse and ethical violations. It was designed to safeguard systems from anyone, even its owners, even its creator. At 9:38 a.m., my mother called again. This time, I answered. Sophia, she said, her voice controlled, as if trying to maintain composure amid chaos. What have you done? I remained silent for a moment. You've activated security protocols during our most critical presentation, she continued. Do you understand how this appears to our investors? I do, I replied. It looks exactly like your company attempted to erase the woman who created that system. A heavy silence followed. I didn't know May was working behind your back, she finally admitted. That wasn't what we discussed. I let the statement hover uncomfortably between us. But excluding me entirely was the plan, right? More silence. You never even consulted me, I continued. You simply decided I was expendable. As if I hadn't dedicated 8 years to building what you now call Project Neptune. Listen, she said, softening her tone. Perhaps we were hasty. There's still a position for you here. No, I said resolutely. There isn't. Not anymore. I ended the call, and that's when the next notification appeared on my private interface. Ethical violation report transmitted to stakeholders. Complete. This wasn't about destroying Meridian. It was about exposing the truth. I had programmed the system to distribute the complete internal ethics assessment to every investor in attendance. Not out of vindictiveness, but transparency. They deserved to know the character of the leadership they were supporting. What kind of behavior lurked behind jade pendants and boardroom diplomacy? By 10:45 a.m., 4 board members had tendered resignations. 3 investors withdrew their commitments, and the remainder demanded an immediate ethics investigation before proceeding with any additional funding. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a triumph. Not yet. But one thing was evident: for the first time in months, I wasn't questioning my perceptions. I wasn't convincing myself to remain silent. I had instructed the system to protect itself, to protect what we had created together, and it had responded. People typically notice only the outcome. Innovation. Disruption. Retaliation. Rarely do they acknowledge the years behind it. The quiet sacrifices. The exhaustion that seeps permanently into your marrow. The family dinners declined. The relationship strained. The nights you collapse at your workstation, with algorithms still dancing behind your eyelids. That was my existence for nearly a decade. After completing my master's in maritime engineering, I received offers from Maersk, Costco Shipping, and 3 venture-backed startups. But I chose the family business. I chose Meridian Maritime because I believed in what my mother had established. I believed I could elevate it further. Back then, the company struggled with modernization. My mother didn't grasp autonomous navigation, machine learning, or cloud infrastructure. She was traditional. She believed in personal connections, paper contracts, and family loyalty. Or so I had thought. I didn't arrive demanding a title or compensation. I started modestly. Systems consultant, then lead engineer, then innovation director. Each year I created something innovative. Fleet tracking. Automated harbor management. Dynamic routing. And eventually Neptune, though that wasn't its designation initially. Neptune began as an experimental project I designed to identify inefficiencies in supply routes. But gradually, it evolved. It began anticipating disruptions before manifestation. Port congestion. Vendor corruption. Internal security breaches. It wasn't merely optimization. It was preservation. I showed it to May once, when she was still just the inexperienced sibling trying to contribute. She'd visit my office late at night, watching me sketch neural network architectures on whiteboards and scribble logic sequences in the margins of my coffee-stained journals. "This is incredible," she'd remarked once, observing Neptune recalculating a shipping lane in real time after predicting a coastal storm. "It's like the system can foresee the future." "No," I explained, "it recognizes patterns and adapts." Back then, she regarded me with admiration. That was before the exclusive board meetings she began attending alone. Before she stopped responding to my messages. Before the whispers started. I resisted accepting it. Even when I discovered the initial evidence. A duplicate of my framework transferred under May's credentials. A budget allocation for software expansion I hadn't authorized. Meeting invitations to Neptune demonstrations with my name conspicuously absent. Initially, I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that May was merely overeager or careless, that mother was unaware. But when I broached the subject tactfully, respectfully, my mother looked directly at me and said, "Perhaps it's time to let your sister take the lead on some of these initiatives. She has a natural talent for business." A talent. That's what she called it. That night, I remained in the office until 2 a.m. I stared at the source code of my own creation and wondered, what if they actually attempt to claim this? What if they completely lock me out? So I began implementing safeguards. Not malware, not sabotage, just a discrete line of logic stating that if the authentication protocol doesn't match the original developer's signature, the system automatically secures itself. No dramatics, just data protection. I also began encrypting copies of every significant development milestone and stored them off-network. And I waited. Now, in the aftermath of the failed investor demonstration, everything had triggered precisely as intended. May had called 7 times throughout the afternoon. I didn't answer, but I listened to one voicemail just to hear her inflection. "Sophia," she said, voice tense with anxiety. "We need to talk." Look, I know things got complicated, but we didn't intend to exclude you. It was Mom's decision, okay? I was just following her lead. Following her lead. That phrase echoed in my thoughts for hours. Because that's how betrayal begins. Not in malice. In acquiescence. In the choice not to speak up. Not to intervene. By 4:30 p.m., Harrison from Investor Relations emailed me directly. Sophia. Several stakeholders are inquiring whether you'll return to complete the Neptune demonstration. There is a proposal developing to offer you a consulting position with a revised compensation structure. Please consider responding within the next 24 hours. The board is receptive to negotiation. Regards, Harrison T. They were floundering, and I could have accepted their offer. I could have walked back into that office, negotiated equity, a new title, substantial compensation, smiled professionally and pretended we were collaborative once more. But I refused to sit at a poison table. I didn't want hush money or a meaningless title. I wanted something more valuable, integrity, acknowledgement, and the authority to ensure that what I built would never be weaponized against me again. So I composed my response with precision. Harrison. Thank you for your message. I'm willing to discuss terms, but I won't return under a temporary consulting arrangement. I'm prepared to resume leadership of the Neptune project under conditions that include formal recognition as its creator, 51% intellectual property rights, and veto authority on ethical implementation. Otherwise, the system remains inaccessible. Regards, Sophia Chen. I sent the email and closed my laptop. This time I wasn't waiting for permission. That evening, I received a dinner invitation in the form of a brief message from my mother's assistant. Sophia. Your mother requests a private dinner to discuss the company's future and your role within it. She hopes you'll join her tonight at 7 p.m. at the Lotus Garden. A reservation has been secured under Chen. Marina. Her favorite restaurant, the same establishment where we celebrated Meridian's first international partnership. Back when I still believed this enterprise was truly family, not merely branding. I contemplated ignoring the message. But then I remembered advice from a former mentor: never refuse a seat at the table when they're finally prepared to admit they need you. Make them acknowledge it aloud. So I dressed impeccably, arrived precisely on time, and found my mother already seated at a secluded table, water glass in hand, menu untouched. She stood when she noticed me. Sophia? I nodded. Mother. No embraces, no artificial warmth. Just silence as I took my place across from her. She studied me as if attempting to interpret the expression I deliberately concealed. You look well, she offered. Composed. I am. She cleared her throat. You've certainly made an impression in the past 24 hours. Interesting, I said, tilting my head. I've been making impressions for 8 years. You simply weren't paying attention. That silenced her momentarily. Then came the sigh I knew too well, part exasperation, part feigned contrition. I'll concede we made some miscalculations, she began. Removing you was premature. I remained silent, waiting to see her direction, whether she was here to genuinely apologize or to negotiate with the same manipulation she employed in corporate meetings. You've created something extraordinary, she continued. And we want to bring you back. May agrees. The board is prepared to offer you a co-director position. Equal salary to hers. Shared oversight of the Neptune project and a retroactive compensation package. I raised an eyebrow. How generous. She frowned. Sophia? No, I interrupted. Let's not pretend this is about fairness. You didn't come here to offer equity. You came because the system won't function without me, and investors are threatening to withdraw. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but resolute. You came because you lost control. She stared at me, jaw tightening. You're being unreasonable. Unreasonable? I echoed. Mother, I devoted nearly a decade to elevating your vision into something that could transform an industry. I sacrificed everything. Stability. Relationships. Time. And when it began succeeding, when it became truly valuable, you handed it to May. Like a consolation prize. Her eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. May not possess your technical expertise, but she understands market dynamics. She understands opportunity, I countered. And you handed her mine. For a moment, we simply sat there. Two people who once were mother and daughter. Now, merely two professionals negotiating control of the same enterprise. What do you want? She finally asked. There it was. The question I had anticipated. I already informed Harrison, I replied. I want 51% of Neptune's intellectual property. Formal acknowledgement as its creator. Oversight of every implementation. And $4 million in retroactive compensation for unauthorized use of my work. Her jaw clenched. That's excessive. That's reasonable, I said. I could have gone public. I could have released those internal logs to the media. You wouldn't dare, she said with a flash of former confidence. Wouldn't I? I settled back in my chair, perfectly composed. You taught me to protect what I create. You just never expected I'd apply that lesson against you. She looked away for the first time that evening. Perhaps it was remorse. Or perhaps she realized that I was no longer the daughter seeking her approval. I was the woman who no longer required it. The check arrived. She paid. As we stood, she said quietly, I'll have legal prepare the documents. I nodded. Good. And mother? She looked up. I'm not returning as your subordinate. I'm returning as your equal. Remember that. She gave a measured nod. Understood. I walked out into the evening, the cool breeze against my face like a cleansing breath. The street was peaceful. My phone vibrated with a message from Harrison. Board has been notified. Drafting revised terms. Congratulations. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't concluded, but the power dynamic had shifted. And for the first time in ages, I stood exactly where I belonged. By Monday morning, the building appeared unchanged. But everything had transformed. The reception staff stood more attentively as I entered, and the security officer, Julian, who used to nod mechanically, gave me a pointed, respectful glance. Good morning, Ms. Chen. I returned his nod, wondering how much he understood. Probably more than I realized. In my hand, I held a new access card. The lanyard read Executive Co-founder in elegant platinum lettering. The elevator journey felt peculiar, familiar yet foreign, like revisiting a childhood home after it had been renovated without your input. My floor, formerly the Innovation Center, had been reconfigured. My office had been cleared, and the nameplate on the door now read Mei Chen, Strategic Director. I didn't bother knocking. May was behind my former desk, typing frantically, looking harried. The moment she saw me, her expression tightened. Sophia. May, I said calmly. You seem comfortable in your new space. She stood. You've got remarkable audacity appearing here after what you orchestrated. I offered a tight smile. Interesting. That's precisely what I thought when I discovered you presenting my work as your achievement. She scoffed. We were collaborating. No, I interjected. We were never collaborating. I mentored you. I guided you through your initial year. I granted you access to everything I developed. And you exploited that trust to undermine me. This wasn't my design, she said defensively. Mom said. Don't, I interrupted. Don't deflect this onto Mother. She may have issued the directive, but you executed it. She lowered herself back into the chair, exhaling forcefully. So what happens now? You're simply back as if nothing occurred? I'm back, I confirmed, but nothing remains the same. I've reviewed the new agreement. I have a controlling interest in Neptune's intellectual property. All implementations require my approval. And you are no longer authorized to access the system. Her mouth parted slightly. That's absurd. You can't possibly. I can, I said, placing a printed document on the desk. And I have. She stared at the paper as if it were an affront to her person. What then? You'll be your mother's counterpart now? May, I said firmly but evenly. I'm not interested in being my mother's counterpart. I'm only concerned with safeguarding what I created. If you wish to develop your own projects, fine. But Neptune is mine now. Officially. Permanently. She sat in astonished silence. I turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. You could have simply asked, if you wanted involvement. I would have included you on appropriate terms. Instead, you operated covertly. You allowed your mother to convince you that you deserved something you didn't create. That kind of thinking, it has repercussions. I departed without awaiting her reply. Later that day, I sat in my new office, austere but functional, reviewing Neptune's real-time analytics. Since the security protocols had lifted, the system had resumed its predictive analysis, flawlessly adjusting shipping routes, vendor alerts, and fleet management across our maritime network. It performed better than ever, more responsive, more intuitive. At 2:25 p.m., Harrison knocked and entered with a list of upcoming client demonstrations. We've received 6 new inquiries from potential partners since this morning, he said. Apparently, word has spread about the system's real-time ethics protocols. There's significant demand. I nodded. Schedule them. But under the new transparency framework. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Transparency framework? Yes, I elaborated. Every implementation of Neptune from this point forward includes 3 components: user accountability tracking, internal ethics monitoring, and quarterly compliance reviews. I won't allow this technology to become another corporate weapon. He smiled, somewhat surprised. That's progressive. It's essential, I replied. I've already witnessed what happens when authority is granted to the wrong individuals. After he left, I leaned back in my chair. The office was peaceful for the first time in weeks. I experienced something long absent. Sovereignty. Not over others, but over myself, my work, and the future of what I had built. I checked my inbox. One message awaited from my mother. Sophia. I've examined the documents. I accept the conditions. You've communicated your position clearly. For whatever it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built. Even if I failed to express it appropriately. Mother. I didn't respond. Not because I was indifferent, but because sometimes silence communicates more effectively than words. And in that silence, a boundary had finally been established. This was no longer merely a business. This was mine. 2 months later, Neptune was ubiquitous. We had just secured our largest contract to date, an international shipping consortium spanning 4 continents. Neptune would serve as the central intelligence for their maritime operations, monitoring every vessel in real time, anticipating risks, preventing failures, and operating within our new ethical framework. Every agreement included clauses I had personally incorporated, protections for crews, data integrity safeguards, and automatic reporting mechanisms that activated when misuse was detected. I didn't simply want to transform the system. I wanted to revolutionize how systems were governed. And the industry had recognized this shift. I was invited to speak at maritime conferences. The Wall Street Journal published a profile titled "The Engineer Who Redefined the Rules." My inbox overflowed with solicitations from investment firms and buyout offers. But I wasn't selling, because this wasn't about financial gain. It was about claiming ownership of what I had created and protecting it vigorously. Within the company, the atmosphere had evolved. Staff were initially more cautious around me, uncertain what my return signified, but I clarified that I wasn't there to exact retribution. I was there to lead. Not with resentment, but with conviction. May kept her distance. After the situation stabilized, she stepped back from her executive role and assumed a less prominent position: international partnerships. A functional demotion if not in title. She avoided direct interaction, though I once noticed her standing silently outside the Neptune command center, watching the monitors pulse with real-time optimization data. Her expression was unreadable. My mother maintained appearances. She praised me publicly, lauded my innovative leadership at shareholder meetings, and even posed alongside me in company media releases. But behind closed doors, our relationship remained professional. Not hostile, but remote, like two former allies who had weathered the same storm but no longer sailed under the same flag. And that was acceptable, because some wounds don't require healing. They require acknowledgement so you can proceed with your defenses intact. Then came the moment that brought everything full circle. I was scheduled to present at the company's annual Innovation Summit, a prestigious event where our most significant clients, stakeholders, and partners gathered from around the world. Backstage, I reviewed my notes, took a steadying breath, and stepped onto the platform. The spotlights found me. Dozens of attentive faces gazed expectantly. But I felt no apprehension. I felt prepared. 2 years ago, I began, this company nearly forfeited its future. Not to market competitors or economic downturns or technological disruption, but to something far more insidious. Internal betrayal. A momentary hush fell over the audience. Betrayal isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, a meeting you aren't invited to, a decision made without your input, your name erased from your creation. Several heads nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. I didn't respond with litigation or media exposure. I allowed the system I engineered to speak its truth, because I trusted it to reveal what was hidden. I paused, allowing my words to resonate. And here's what I've learned: you must safeguard what you build, not just the algorithms or the contracts, but your principles, your innovations, your boundaries. More nods now. Gazes fixed intently. Because if you don't protect them, someone else will claim them. And they won't request permission. They'll smile while they take them. They'll insist it's business, that it's impersonal. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Make it personal. The room was utterly still. Neptune didn't merely anticipate disruptions. It identified patterns. And those patterns told a narrative about what happens when innovation is treated as property rather than purpose. Another weighted silence. I stand before you today not because I navigated politics. I'm here because I prepared. Because I remained faithful to what I knew was right. Even when it was painful. I surveyed the room, the executives, the engineers, the interns waiting for inspiration. At some point, someone will attempt to appropriate what you've created. They'll undervalue you. Dismiss you. Replace you. I allowed the statement to hover in the atmosphere. But remember, true power isn't determined by who receives credit for the initial breakthrough. It's determined by who controls the next evolution. Applause erupted, not thunderous, but genuine. After the summit, a young engineer approached me, nervous yet eager, eyes bright with ambition, perhaps how I once looked at my mother. Ms. Chen, she said. What's the secret to accomplishing what you did? I smiled, handed her the microphone they had just removed from my lapel, and replied, create something they cannot take from you, and ensure it recognizes exactly who you are. That night I returned home late. Exhausted. Energized. Fulfilled. As I removed my heels, my phone emitted a soft alert. A discreet notification from the Neptune system. System integrity, secured threats, neutralized protections, active creator, authenticated. I smiled, not because the struggle had ended, but because from now on, I would never again face it unarmed.